presenter today is Arnt. Huh? Meditation. Forget our presenter. It's way too soon. Don't even think about it. David Cross, please come up. Our meditation leader today is David Cross.
Thanks, Dad.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, you left me with such life. Such life happening.
Oh,
Turn it on.
See, that's one of my other jobs. She's a teacher.
Right. Such life happening here. Meditation. So I'm going to read something that was taken down some 2,600 years ago. Words from a man known as Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu. And it's about meditation. 30 spokes are made one by holes in a hub, by vacancies joining them for a wheel's use. The use of clay in molding cups comes from the hollow of its absence. Doors, windows in a house are used for their emptiness. Thus, we are helped by what is not to use what is. We are helped by what is not to use what is. What is not is the space preceding thought. Space allows for creative quiet. We call this meditation. Let us meditate. With eyes relaxed, soften your body. Bring your attention to the rise and fall of breath. When thought comes, simply notice and allow. Bring attention to breath. Bring attention to breath. Notice your body, your mind. Thank you. Thank you.
now to Arnt. Arnt Thorkildsen is our speaker today, our presenter, and the topic is the 3 R's, Readin, Writin, and Rithmetic. Johannes Gutenberg changed the world when he invented the printing press. Man learned how to read and write. We now have books and schools and libraries. We became educated. We went to the moon and back. We had access to ideas in every language. Arnt's going to talk to us about that. And he's also going to read Erica's letter from the book Only My Life by Gerda Weissman-Klein. We welcome Arnt. Good luck. Please entertain us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today is a first for me because sitting over here is my youngest granddaughter, Elizabeth. 2015 Open Circle. Today I shall tell you a few stories. Some are short and sweet, while another will be sad and very painful. Let us begin with two little words. The two little words are these: thank you. And sometimes we forget to use them, and they can mean so much. Nancy Setterbow is a most gracious of ladies. She is from Frankfort, Michigan, and lives in Mazatlan. She has one granddaughter, and when the granddaughter graduated from high school, she sent her a check for $100. When the granddaughter graduated from college, Nancy sent her a check for $300. But she did not sign the check. 3 days later, the granddaughter called on the telephone and said, "Grandma, you forgot to sign the check." Nancy replied, "You forgot to say thank you for the last one." Silently, she walked up silently and stands in front of me. She says not a word. She opens her left hand. I reach in my pocket for the little change I have. I place it in her hand. I say nothing. She says nothing. Her shoes are black. Her socks are black. Her blouse is light blue. Her hair is dark with streaks of gray. Her face is tired. She is tired. She slowly walks away, and I say to no one, it is better to give than to receive. A blank page. I stare at it and I say, what am I going to write? I continue to stare at it, and then my eyes go to the lights on the router, the master controller of my computer. The lights blink on and off. They stop. Then they start again. Blinking on and off. I become hypnotized by the lights blinking off and on, and I say, is that the way my brain works? On and off. Stuff comes in and stuff goes out. The lights do not stop. And I say, thank God, since I have so much more to learn. So much more. And I think about how much more I want to learn and how little I really know. The first book I ever read was in 1945, Tarzan of the Apes. At the end of the book, I was ready to move to the deep jungles of the Congo. Then in Seattle, after I learned how to read English, it was Call of the Wild and Rin Tin Tin. Then I had a summer job at the University of Washington, and I saw their library. Oh my, I want to read all these books. I want to stay here forever. But that was not to be. Now my youngest granddaughter is at the University of Washington, And she writes me, "Grandpa, I just love it, and I want to stay there forever." Perhaps that is the way it is supposed to be. On Fifth Avenue in New York City, there is a store where the books cost thousands. I just walked around in it for hours in awe, gazing at these beautiful books that hold so many stories. The Vatican in Rome has an amazing collection of books and old manuscripts, things that are priceless. Mr. Gutenberg, I salute you. And I say thank you. Thank you for tinkering and inventing the Gutenberg printing press, the now printing machine that can produce books by the hundreds in minutes. It has brought us so much. Our ability to read, to share stories, knowledge, science, math, history, and writings that can be translated into every language in the world. There are estimated to be 7,000 languages spoken around the world. The language spoken by the most people are these: Mandarin, Spanish, English, Hindi, Arabic, Portuguese, Bengali, Russian, Japanese, and Punjabi. I shall not include rap or hip-hop or some form of texting, nor the language of America's youth and their use of the word like, awesome. Know what I mean? It is a new language which only they understand. The journey of writing began in Persia, and when I look at Arabic writing on a wall, or Chinese or Japanese symbols, I just say as I stare at them, I don't get it. But they do. We read from left to right. Arabic is right to left. And Chinese and Japanese symbols is from the top to the bottom. The Egyptian hieroglyphics are read in the direction of the beak of the ibis on the wall. A young French scholar figured this out in 1870. If the beak is facing left, you must read the writings in that direction. This simple thing has stymied scholars for centuries, and I am just thankful that we have the Greek alphabet. X, Y, and Zeta, X, Y, and Z in Spanish. It's just so much better than X, Y, and Z. I do not do well with modern fiction, and I try my utmost to avoid it. But that is not to say that all fiction is bad. I've read Michener, Tolstoy, Melville, Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe was published in 1719, and the original title was The Life and Strange Surprising Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. And Miguel de Cervantes, who wrote, the title was The Ingenious Gentleman, Don Quixote of La Mancha. In 1605. These classics still survive today. So many of my friends are in books. Dr. Jacob Bronowski, who wrote The Ascent of Man, and Allah even with civilization and the Jews. But my dearest ones are Maimonides and Socrates. Maimonides in the year 1200 said, "I would rather please one intelligent man than 10,000 fools." And Socrates, who was indicted by the Greek Senate as a heretic and sentenced to death, he was in his jail cell when a young man was outside singing a song, and Socrates said, "Young man, come here, come here, come here. Teach me that song." The young man says, "What for? You are to be executed and die tomorrow morning." Socrates said, yes, I know all that. But before I die, I would like to learn one more thing. Not only was writing finally created for all to learn, but also the most important thing of all, books on mathematics. 2 plus 2, 6 times 6, meters, algebra, geometry, and calculus. Today, without this, we would not be able to function, nor would we have been able to go to the moon and back. Readin, Writin, Rithmetic, the 3 R's. Finally, all in books. All things, stories, math, information, and knowledge. The world had changed, and all thanks to one German blacksmith, Johannes Gutenberg. At this time, there were only a few books in existence, and most were Bibles, and they were all written in Latin, a language only spoken in the Catholic Church by priests. It was not until 17 or 1800 that books became available and reading was taught. My mother told me that my great-grandmother Anna was the only person in the neighborhood who could read. This would have been around 1860. When the newspaper arrived, all the neighbors would gather at her house where she would read the paper with the news to them. Andrew Carnegie gave a wonderful gift to America when he donated his monies to the Carnegie Library. If you could read, you could borrow a book for free. Earth may be 15.4 billion years old, but we have only been here for 25 or 50 million years, but have only had access to reading, writing, and arithmetic for the last 200 years, give or take. And the books have given us knowledge, and with that knowledge, we have created wonderful, wonderful things. It is still sad to see and hear that so many peoples in this world do not have access to a book or education, and some are denied that just because they are women or young girls. Today, 500 years later, I shall tell you about only one book that a dear friend gave to me. The title is All But My Life. It was written by Gerda Wiseman Klein, and it took her 3 years to write. And in 1986, she received an Oscar for Best Documentary, and this is her picture from that ceremony receiving the Oscar. I now read to you from the book, page 1, paragraph 1 and 2. a watch lying on the green carpet of the living room of my childhood. The hands seemed to stand motionless at 9:10, freezing time when it happened. There would be a past only, the future uncertain. Time had stopped for the present. Morning, 9:10. This is all I'm able to grasp. The hands of the watch seem so cruel. Slowly they blur into its face. I lift my eyes to the window. Everything looks unfamiliar, as in a dream. Several motorcycles roar down the street. The cyclists wear a green-gray uniform, and I hear voices, first a few, and then more, and many, many shouting something that is impossible and unreal. Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. And the watch says 9:10. I did not know then that an invisible curtain had parted and that I walked on an unseen stage to play a part in a tragedy that was to last 6 years. Gerda Wiseman was born in Violets, Poland. She was 15 years old in 1939 and celebrated her 21st birthday on May 8, 1945, the day that Germany finally surrendered. A few days after that, she met a U.S. Army lieutenant by the name of Kurt Klein. When they met, she asked, "Why are you talking to me? I'm a Jew." He replied, "So am I. I was born in Germany. My father sent me and my brother to America in 1932, but my parents could not get an exit visa. They were too late." Hitler and the Nazis were in power, and the borders were closed. Gerda married Kurt Klein in Paris in 1947 and moved to Buffalo, New York. In February 1945, the Germans started to move 3,000 girls and women from Poland as the Russians were coming from the east. They marched for 3 months, and only 247 survived. When Gerda was liberated on May 8, 1945, she weighed 67 pounds. In the book is a letter from a friend of Gerda's that I shall now read. I was home alone, waiting for Papa and Mama, when a letter came. There was no return address on it. The handwriting looked like Erica's. I was afraid to open it because somehow I felt that this letter did not contain the happy news of her marriage. When I finally tore the letter open, my fears were confirmed. In it were a few tattered pages from a child's notebook, some of the letters big, as if written by a 6-year-old, others tiny. Although there were no marks of tears, the letters seemed to vibrate with pain. Here is what I read. Erica's letter. It is dark outside. It is night. A deadly silence hangs over the house, where 2 days ago there was so much life, so much dear life. I'm sitting on the floor to catch the little light that is falling from the tavern across the street to a patch on the floor. It is a bluish light, and in it lies my paper. They are sitting in the tavern. They, the murderers. I am in the dark, alone in the dark. just as my heart and soul will forever remain in the dark and in the light of those criminals. The light of their crime illuminates the paper to let me write about their deeds. You know what happened? No, you do not know. Yesterday, yes, it was yesterday. Early in the morning, we heard a lot of noise, screams, and crying and begging for mercy. They were the cries of Jewish people in the streets. Quickly, my father and I ran down the back stairs to hide in the basement, while my mother went to get the baby out of the crib. He was sleepily rubbing his eyes. He was so small. He did not know that you had to be watchful, even in your sleep. Maybe he was dreaming of the toys he never had. Maybe my mother did not wake him fast enough. I imagine how he stood rubbing his baby eyes when the murderers entered in their gray uniforms and took them both, my mother and the baby. He was not dressed because his little suit is still lying there. He must have kicked them off and gone half naked from the cellar. We heard the screams. Why does the world go on when things like this happen? We heard distant screams for hours and hours. Only when night fell was it quiet. We hoped and prayed that Mama and the child had found refuge somewhere. After it had been dark for hours, we crawled out of the cellar. The house was empty. Empty was our flat. Empty the flats of all of our friends and that of the boy I loved. Where are they? We went to the street. We went to all the homes. We met a few ghost-like people who were swaying as if coming from another world. In one house, we found an old man, dressed in his garment of white, in which to stand before God on the day of judgment. He was saying the prayer for the dead. We begged him to tell us what happened. He looked at his wild eye, pointed with his finger to heaven, and continued to pray like a sacred figure about to enter heaven. He stood there alone. Around him a world of sin and unspeakable crime. Finally, we met a young man who told us a tragic tale. Old people, young people, and children had been taken to the marketplace, where they had undressed and lay naked on the stones, face down, and the murderers on horses, and brandishing guns, trampled on that screaming human pavement. Many were killed by the horseshoes. The whips left bloody traces. After the initial thirst of the sadist was satisfied, those who remained alive had to march naked outside the town. They had to dig their own grave and stand on the rim until a hail of bullets killed them. Strangers embraced as they went to sleep forever. We went there. What were laws now forbidding Jews to leave the city limits? But nobody thought us or cared. The moon was shining. We saw a great square grave, half open, yet a mountain of naked bodies in it. Many we recognized. We found my mother. She was all bloody. We did not find my little brother. I found Henrik, the one I loved more than life, who was to be my husband. I kissed his dead face. Not one tear did I shed in that grave. Only my heart died. Do you know what? If they would come tomorrow and kill my father, I would not care. I would not cry. I would be glad for him. I wish they would kill me. From now on, I I will walk wherever it is not permitted. I want them to catch me. I want them to kill me because I don't care. There is only one thing that could stir within me. I want a gun. I want a knife. I want to kill. Just kill. I have no feeling. It won't be a crime. Maybe it won't even give me satisfaction. But I want to kill. What are we waiting for? My father's hair is snowy white. He hasn't spoken, or eaten, or slept, or cried. He is watching while I write this. He is like an animal. I don't think he knows me. My little brother's clothes are there. I can't touch them. There is a brooch on my dress, a little heart that Hennig gave me. There are no hearts. All hearts are dead. How does one bury a heart? I'm writing something to you. It's good to tell it. But who are you? Are you alive? Didn't they murder you yet? Too bad if you too have died. Then you would not get this letter from a girl named Erica who has a dead heart. I never heard from Erica again. What was Erica's crime? What was Gala's crime? Did they rob a bank or break into someone's home? No, none of that. Their only crime, or sin, if one is to call it that, was to be born Jewish. For no other reason did Nazi Germany set upon this path to destroy an entire group of people. Gerda Weizmann was one of the survivors of the Holocaust, a time in history in which man's inhumanity towards man was at its worst. But there was little difference between what happened in Europe and what went on in the Pacific. The atrocious treatment by the Japanese in China and Manchuria was similar, and so was their treatment of prisoners of war in Bataan and Indochina. Just like there is no difference today in the past and what ISIS is doing in Syria, Iraq, and Nigeria. The past is the past. It cannot foretell the future. As I finished my writing for this speech, I recall what Omar Khayyam said as he wrote in the Rubaiyat. He wrote this: "Up from earth's center through the seventh gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sat, and many a knot unraveled by the load, but not the master knot of man's fate." Man's inhumanity towards man. Was this the time when it was at its worst? Or is it still to come? The religious mind control of a person, a society, or a country by a fanatical group such as ISIS, or by a mullah, or the Ayatollah, is now perceived by the world as a greater danger than a war, flood, or famine. An idea or belief cannot be destroyed by a gun or by a drone. We still have the Ukraine and Vladimir Putin, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Korea, Somalia, Nigeria, Tunisia, Libya, Israel, and Palestine, and boatloads of migrants in the Mediterranean and Indian Oceans. Radical Sunni Muslims and radical Shiite Muslims are killing each other as they have for 1,000 years in their belief that only they are the true descendants of Muhammad. No one else or any other religion or faith matters. Now, American Muslims are willing to kill Americans because we are killing fellow Muslims with our guns and drones. Others will say it is only because of America's foreign policy. Both sides cannot be right, but both sides can be wrong. Why are we still in Afghanistan and Iraq? Do we really think that we can solve anything with our drones or our guns? Charles Dickens, in his book, A Christmas Story, has Tiny Tim say at the end, and goodwill towards man. Would the world not be a better place for all mankind if we could believe in these 4 words? Goodwill towards man. We signed a nuclear treaty with Iran, but the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, says that the policy of hate America will still continue. I do not have an answer for these questions or problems. I only know this. I only know this. We still have a forest where one can walk and see and feel the magic of nature. Listen to the sound of the brook, the rustle of the leaves. And we can listen to the magic of Mozart. We can read the genius of Shakespeare. We can sit and watch a sunrise and smell the scent of a rose. We may change, the world may change, but not the scent of a rose. Thank you for listening.
So if anybody has any questions, we can take a few questions. Please stand up or raise your hand and the mic will be brought to you, and do that thing I showed you earlier where you hold it really close. And make your question be known and Mark will play with it.
Play with it.
Play with it.
In a moment. David?
Thank you, Art. In a sense, you said it all. Like Erica's letter could be written now and is being written now anywhere in the world, no matter what the place, but the condition, writing of those conditions. And when you talked about, I only want a gun, I only want a knife, I only want a bomb just strapped to my back, because I want to kill or eliminate violence. And I think of places in the world where this has happened that you mentioned, including Palestine. And I'm reminded that it's not the Israelis per se that are confining these people into the smallest area known on the planet where so many people are barely surviving. But it's a fear-based problem where we want to kill off what we consider to be violence. Just like with Germany, it wasn't the Germans, it was the Nazis. Thank you.
You're welcome. If one looks back at history of all of mankind, especially in the last 100 years, you would think that somewhere, at some time, the world has to stop and say, there has to be an alternative. There has to be something called goodwill towards man. What we presently have cannot continue, nor should it be. How we ever would stop is beyond me. Our desire to exterminate, for example, ISIS, in the belief that killing off 100,000 or 1 million people solves anything is beyond me. I've seen too much of this stuff. I survived World War II. I've been to Korea, I've been to Vietnam, I've seen it all. But sooner or later, we have to stop.
Art, over here in the gazebo, over here. Just one observation. Almost nobody makes any money in peace.
Well, you have a point, but I don't think that money is going to be the overriding factor when the world sits back and says, what the hell have we done? And those moments, sooner or later, will come. What the hell have we done? If you look at air, if you look at water, if you look at people, population, starvation, whatever, diseases, whatever it is, we can fix this. We can solve the world. But who's going to do it? You. Somebody.
In the back.
Hi, I'd like to turn this on. To sort of echo what the last gentleman mentioned, I think that the economic drivers behind war are at the root of why we have so much war. I mean, it's a huge moneymaker. And the people who are getting very, very, very wealthy from war and producing war machines and selling them to our supposed enemies is up. And there was a huge economic driver in Germany as well for the Nazis because of the amount of money.
Look at it this way. The Statue of Liberty, when you enter New York Harbor, which is where I kept, give me your poor, give me, all the rest of it. And then when you go from New Jersey on west, we are the largest producer of arms in the world.
Exactly.
By far.
Yes.
And we will sell $20 or $50 billion worth of airplanes to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
So that they can go and bomb Yemen.
Right.
There's no logic to this. There's just no logic.
None at all. I agree.
And sometimes when the entire world has started digging a ditch, and that's the ditch we are in, and somehow we got to learn to get out of it.
Yes, we do. I absolutely agree with you. We have to stop putting the money in charge, for starters.
Oh, wow.
In the back again?
Thank you for your speech. Do you think it will be possible for a world to exist without religion and politics?
Do I what?
Do you think it will be possible for a world to exist without religion and politics?
You know, in some ways, when you look at just the religion, I think can be a tremendous blessing, I think, for a lot of people. There's no question about it. I mean, you can't argue with the Ten Commandments. They make a lot of sense. On the other hand, when people forget to think independently and become so controlled, whether it's James Jones in Jonestown or whether it's anyone else where they will run like lemmings off of the cliff, I don't know how you sit back and solve a problem of 2,000 or 3,000 years old with the Muslim community. That is going to be a very difficult one. And politics enters into every situation. I don't care where you go.
Over here, if you have time.
Hi. I just like to put a little bit of optimism into this.
Well,
The fact of the matter is, and there's been quite a number of studies done on this over the last 50 years, and quite most of them in the last few years, is this is the most peaceful time in the world that has ever existed, by far. We can go and walk around, walk outside the town wall to get to our fields without fear of being killed. Yes, there are certain areas in the world, and you've covered them all, although I'd like to throw in Zimbabwe. But compared to 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, we're dead peaceful. We are making progress with it. It may not seem like very much, but we are succeeding in dealing with some of these things in manners other than war. Many of the dictators who before would have been waging war happily on their neighbors are not doing it because somehow our political leaders, with all their limitations, have managed to find other ways to pressure them not to.
I recall,
Bravo!
I will disagree with you, sir. I recall many years ago an interview that CNN did on the Prime Minister of India. It was 20 or 30 minutes into this 1 hour discussion. The interrogator mentioned the caste system, the poverty, the pollution, the problems of India that he wanted to talk about. The Prime Minister looked away for a moment and then answered the question this way. Did you know that India has the atomic bomb? That was the answer. And when you have India, and when you have Pakistan, and now Iran, and France, and England, and America, and Russia, and who knows, who else, North Korea, with the, all they have to do is push one button. Now, I can say I am much safer here in Ajijic, in Mexico, but I don't think that I want to go to certain parts of Chicago, or New Orleans, or Miami, or Houston. And when you sit back and say, well, we had less problems 500 years ago, we had less people, I agree, we had less guns, we had a lot of less things. But now, when you put in 10 billion people and try and make every one of them come a peaceful, I wish you luck. I really.
On that lovely note. Everybody, if you want to, you can turn on your cell phones. You're also, as I said, welcome to never